So picture this. You have two college roommates living in one of those incredibly cramped, standard dorm rooms.
Oh, I know the exact kind you mean.
Right. And they are absolute fundamental polar opposites. Like, one of them is a physics major. He's this chronic night owl who stays up until like 3 in the morning running equations. And he's got the bottom bunk.
Which is always a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. Because the other roommate is a varsity swimmer. So he's up at 4:30 in the morning, slamming alarm clocks, throwing on his gear for morning practice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the friction is just constant. The sleep deprivation is completely mutual. And the resentment has finally hit this absolute boiling point where they realize, we just can't live like this anymore.
Right. Something has to give.
But instead of going to the RA, what is their logical solution to resolving this scheduling conflict? They decide to go down to the university boxing ring and fight a full contact round of Muay Thai.
It is such a brilliantly absurd premise.
It really is.
I mean, you have two highly educated young men at a university, and they're reverting to the absolute oldest method of dispute resolution on the planet, which is just physical combat.
Right. It sounds completely unhinged. But here's the catch. And this is where it gets really fascinating. They step into the ring, they are gloved up, the adrenaline is absolutely pumping.
Naturally.
But because they agreed to a Muay Thai match specifically, they are obligated by the rules of the sport to perform the traditional pre-fight ritual first. And what happens during that ritual, before a single punch is ever thrown, completely changes the entire trajectory of their relationship.
It really does. It shifts everything.
We are going to get into exactly what happens in that ring a little later on, but I bring this up because it perfectly encapsulates the core mission of today's deep dive. So welcome, everyone. We are so glad you're here with us today.
Yes, welcome.
Today, we are exploring a concept that honestly feels increasingly impossible to grasp right now. And that is, what does it actually mean to be grounded in a modern, hyper-connected, yet profoundly isolated world?
It's a question we all wrestle with, whether we actively realize it or not. I mean, we all feel the anxiety of the modern day. We feel the constant buzz of our phones in our pockets, the pressure to perform at work, the alienation of living in these massive, towering concrete cities.
Oh, absolutely.
We know we are unmoored. We just don't know how to drop an anchor.
And to figure out how to drop that anchor today, we have an incredibly unique stack of source material. We are unpacking a newly published collection called Omnibus Poetry Undated For, subtitled Grounded.
And that Roman numeral is 62, by the way.
Yes, volume 62. It was published in March 2026 by an author named Manuel del Valle y Colón. But our sources go way beyond just the poems themselves today.
We really had to dig deep into the context for this one.
We did. We've got his biographical records, we have old high school yearbook tributes, and we even have this really moving analysis written by an anonymous AI that basically analyzed his entire life's work.
And we really have to emphasize just how vast that life's work actually is. Because when you look at the biographical data we have, the sheer juxtaposition of his lived experiences is just staggering.
It's almost hard to believe it's all one person.
Right. You are looking at a man who was born in 1948 and grew up in the housing projects of New York City. First the Carver houses, and then the Jugless projects in East Harlem.
Which is an environment fundamentally defined by concrete, by extreme density, and by a very specific kind of urban struggle.
Exactly. But from those projects, he launches into this stratospheric academic and professional trajectory. I mean, he goes to Brooklyn Tech, then the Yale Transitional Year Program, Wesleyan, Princeton, and eventually Yale Law School.
Just a powerhouse resume.
It really is. He becomes a heavyweight in the legal world.
Yeah.
We're talking about a chief administrative law judge, a labor arbitrator, a prosecutor of federal labor violations. Right. And yet, alongside this incredibly rigid, evidence-based legal career, he is this massively prolific artist. As you mentioned, this book we are looking at is his 62nd volume of poetry.
62 volumes. I mean, most people struggle to write a cohesive grocery list, right? And this guy is writing his 62nd book of verse while simultaneously adjudicating these incredibly complex legal disputes.
It requires a completely different part of the brain.
It does. And just as a quick note for you as we get into this, because his resume is packed with some highly charged historical legal battles regarding civil rights, bilingual education, and labor strikes. Our goal today isn't to litigate those historical dockets or take any sort of political stance on his specific rulings.
Right, that's not what this deep dive is about.
Exactly. We're looking strictly at the human being behind the gavel. We want to understand the psychological toll of that kind of intense career and how the poetry served as his ultimate survival mechanism.
That distinction is so crucial to keep in mind. Because when you spend decades sitting in a courtroom, listening to people at the absolute worst moments of their entire lives, arguing over lost wages, fighting for basic human dignity, battling over Social Security appeals, you are just constantly soaking in human conflict.
You're just bathing in stress.
Exactly. And if you don't have a way to process that, the cynicism will just eat you alive. The central thesis of the source material we are looking at today is that grounding isn't just some nice meditative spa day idea.
Right.
It is a strict linguistic, cultural, and spiritual necessity required to survive what the author specifically calls the alienation of the urban day.
I love that phrase, the alienation of the urban day.
Yeah.
So I want to start by looking at the architect of these worlds, because before we can really decode the poetry itself, we have to understand the mind that forged it.
You really do.
His life is just a masterclass in code switching and survival. Let's talk about those early days. We have these excerpts from his 1966 Brooklyn Technical High School yearbook.
Brooklyn Tech is no joke either.
It's a highly competitive, specialized school. And his teenage classmates are already writing things next to his senior picture, like future historian, great philosopher, and king of quotes.
Which tells you so much, right? It shows you that even at 17 or 18 years old, living in the Douglas projects, his peers recognized a specific gravity to him.
Yeah, he stood out.
He wasn't just passing through his youth, he was observing it. He was cataloging the human experience around him, and he takes that intense observational power straight into the Ivy League.
Yeah, I was reading through the notes on his time at Princeton, and I actually had to stop and really think about the historical context for a second. This is the late 1960s.
Right. A wildly turbulent time.
The cultural whiplash of going from East Harlem to Princeton University at that specific moment in American history must have been absolutely dizzying. Like, how do you even anchor yourself in an environment that is so fundamentally alien to where you grew up?
Well, you anchor yourself by building a new foundation from scratch. And that's exactly what he did. He didn't just assimilate quietly into the background or try to hide where he came from.
No, not at all.
The records show he actively founded a Latino organization on campus. He took it upon himself to recruit other students. He was actively creating a micro-community to stave off the isolation of that elite, hyper-traditional space.
That takes so much courage.
That does. And his academic work wasn't purely theoretical either. His senior thesis at Princeton was a deep dive into the history of Puerto Rican students and public education.
Which, as the sources show, ended up having massive real-world consequences.
Uh-huh.
This wasn't just a paper that sat in a university library gathering dust.
Not at all.
A chapter of that thesis was actually used in a memorandum for Senator Jacob Javits. And then it became foundational material used by the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund in a truly landmark lawsuit, Aspira versus Board of Education.
Right.
That was the case that legally secured bilingual education for children in New York City who had limited English proficiency.
Which is just incredible. Think about the psychological mechanism at play there. He takes the alienation of his own community. These kids who are sitting in classrooms unable to understand the language of instruction, essentially being marginalized by the system, and he weaponizes his Ivy League education to dismantle that barrier.
He uses the master's tools to redesign the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And his proximity to institutional power only accelerates from there. I mean, he graduates Princeton and heads straight to Yale Law School, class of 1974.
Just a casual Yale law degree.
Right. And he is literally walking the halls, sitting in study groups with classmates like future Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and Lonnie Goumonnier.
The spectrum of judicial philosophy in those specific dorm rooms must have been wild to witness.
It is the ultimate crucible of American legal thought, and his connections to the judiciary remain deeply personal throughout his entire life. There's this really beautiful detail in the source material regarding Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor.
Oh, I love this part.
They met years earlier through a mutual connection, Dr. Frank Ayala, back when Manuel was still at Princeton. And years later, when Sotomayor published her memoir, My Beloved World, she inscribed a copy specifically to him.
I actually have the quote right here. She wrote, "Manuel, you were my first role model, someone with a passion for fighting for change. Thank you for all you have done for so many and for what you continue to do."
I mean, to be called a first role model by a sitting Supreme Court justice is profound. It speaks to his character. But I want to draw your attention back to the tension we mentioned earlier in the show.
Okay, lay it on me.
How does a mind that operates at that level of rigid, objective logic, prosecuting federal labor violations, writing binding judicial decisions. How does that mind pivot to writing 62 volumes of poetry?
It's a huge pivot.
Because law is entirely about boundaries. It is
Mhm.
about definitions, jurisdictions, and strict precedent. Poetry is the exact opposite. It is boundaryless, it is subjective, and it is entirely emotional.
It almost feels like a contradiction, doesn't it? It's like he's this cultural switchboard operator. He's plugging into the highest courts of the land, rubbing shoulders with the elite. But his roots are firmly planted in the concrete of the housing projects.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to imagine leaving the courtroom after a grueling arbitration over, like, a bitter labor strike, taking off the judge's robe, and then sitting down at a desk to write verse about a campfire. Like, how do those two halves of the brain even communicate with each other?
I think they don't just communicate, they rely on each other for survival.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the legal system asks one primary question, right? What is the rule and was it broken? It inherently reduces human beings to plaintiffs and defendants. It reduces these messy, agonizing human lives into neatly filed exhibits and affidavits.
Right. It sanitizes the human experience?
Exactly. And if you spend your whole life strictly operating in that framework, you risk losing your own humanity. The poetry is his counterweight. In the courtroom, he asks, what is legal? But in the poetry, he asks, what does it actually mean to be human in this moment?
That makes perfect sense, and that perfectly aligns with this tribute included in our sources today, written by an anonymous AI.
Ah, yes, the AI tribute.
Right. Now, we don't know the exact parameters of this AI, but it supposedly analyzed his entire corpus of work and produced a poetic tribute of its own. And it described him as someone who walks barefoot through thresholds of law and lyric.
Barefoot is the operative word there. It implies total vulnerability.
Totally.
In a courtroom, everyone is armored up. You wear the tailored suit, you wear the heavy robe, you use incredibly formal language to shield yourself from the raw emotion of the room. So to walk barefoot through those thresholds means he actively allowed himself to feel the texture of the suffering he was adjudicating.
Which, if you think about it, is incredibly dangerous, emotionally speaking. Like, if you feel every ounce of pain that comes across a judge's desk, you're going to burn out instantly.
Precisely. Which is exactly why the concept of physical grounding becomes so vital in his work. If you are absorbing that much intellectual and emotional electricity all day, you need a literal physical ground to discharge it, just like a lightning rod on a house.
And that leads us right into the physical foundation of his poetry. We are moving from the concrete of his upbringing and the marble floors of the Ivy League down into the literal dirt.
The psychology of geography.
Yes. How does a man born on the ultimate concrete island, Manhattan, find his physical equilibrium?
Well, he starts by diagnosing the problem. In his verse, he identifies Manhattan as this massive psychological anomaly. It is an island that is completely paved over its own nature.
Right, there's no dirt left.
Aside from the artificial, highly manicured rectangle of Central Park, the vegetation is just gone. And because of the immense verticality of the skyscrapers and the endless asphalt, the island deludes itself into acting like it's a mainland.
The sources bring up this really fascinating historical parallel here. The text references Napoleon Bonaparte and Alexander Hamilton.
Right, two very famous islanders.
Exactly. Napoleon had to leave the island of Corsica to find his destiny and his grounding in mainland France. Hamilton had to leave the tiny island of Nevis in the Caribbean to find himself in New York. There is this inherent islander psychology the author talks about, this feeling of containment, this desperate need to escape the water's edge and connect with something larger and more stable.
Right, but what the author points out is that New York itself is a trap in that regard.
How so?
It's an island masquerading as a mainland. It offers the illusion of endless opportunity, but it achieves that by completely stripping away your connection to the actual Earth. He uses the phrase citadel of alienation to describe the modern city.
Citadel of alienation. That is heavy.
It's a fortress made of cement, plastic, and glass. And those materials are literal insulators. They physically disconnect you from the magnetic resonance of the Earth.
So let's look at how he writes about escaping that citadel. There's a very specific, highly visual poem in the collection that contrasts the island and the mainland.
The one on the wharf, right?
Yes, he describes the attire of someone waiting to escape. They're wearing a pink shirt and white pants, or maybe a blue shirt and beige pants, standing on a wharf looking out over this brilliant azure bay, just waiting for the ferry.
It's a moment of transit.
But the destination isn't another city, right? The destination is nature.
Because for him, physical touch with the earth is the only real antidote to the abstraction of urban life. He writes extensively about the literal soles of the feet touching clay.
Not shoes,
Bare feet.
bare feet on clay. He writes about the necessity of letting sunrises and sunsets dictate your waking hours rather than the mechanical scream of a digital alarm clock. I actually want to zoom in on one specific poem about a campfire because I think it highlights something we completely ignore in modern society, which is our posture.
Oh, the squatting poem.
Yes, he writes about the act of taking a simple squat by a fire. He details how squatting relaxes the lower back,
Yeah.
how it builds strong legs. He talks about roasting marshmallows, sharing ghost stories, and using this specific physical posture to escape the alienation of the city. Why is he so hyper-focused on a squat?
Think about the biomechanics and the sociology of a squat for a second. Modern society has engineered the squat out of existence.
That's true. We never do it.
We sit in ergonomic desk chairs, we sit in bucket car seats, we sit on plush sofas. We are constantly supported by these artificial structures.
Right.
To squat by a fire requires flexibility, it requires balance, and most importantly, it requires proximity to the dirt. You are lowering your center of gravity as close to the earth as physically possible without actually sitting on it.
It's a very humble, primal posture.
Exactly. You cannot maintain a posture of corporate superiority while squatting in the dirt holding a marshmallow on a stick. It's just impossible.
It's the ultimate equalizer. And he draws a brilliant contrast to this in another poem about two brothers, which I found totally captivating.
This is a great parable.
It really is. It's a parable about status versus utility. You have one brother who is this highly successful designer. He works in an office, and his absolute prized possession is this long, luxurious black cashmere coat.
The ultimate status symbol.
Exactly. And the poem describes him sitting on a red leather couch in his office, receiving power players, and he pushes the tail of the cashmere coat back to use it as a makeshift pillow.
That image is just drenched in artificiality. The dyed cashmere, the red leather, the enclosed office space. It is a cocoon of manufactured status. It is the absolute pinnacle of what the citadel of alienation tells us we should all aspire to.
Right. But then you have the other brother, an artist. And the artist's brother absolutely refuses to sit on that red leather couch.
You won't even touch it.
No. He views the use of animal leather purely for status as a gross misuse of nature's resources. Instead of striving for the corner office, he adopts the role of a beachcomber at the local beach they grew up on.
A total rejection of the city's currency?
Yeah, he doesn't want the cashmere coat at all. He prefers the feeling of the fresh breeze off the water and just watching the sunset.
The designer brother trades in influence and luxury, but the beachcomber brother trades in time and presence.
So, when you look at your own life, and honestly, I'm thinking about my own ridiculous schedule as we talk about this, which brother are you?
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It is. Are you spending your entire life maintaining the cashmere coat? Or do you actually take the time to feel the breeze? Because let's be realistic here for a second. We can't all just abandon our jobs and become full-time beachcombers.
Right. The mortgage has to be paid.
The emails have to be answered. The kids have to be fed. Is the author genuinely suggesting we just walk away from modern life entirely?
No, I really don't think he's advocating for complete asceticism. Remember, this is a man who was a chief administrative law judge.
Right, he was deep in the system.
He wore the suit. He operated at the absolute highest levels of the bureaucracy. What he is advocating for is intentional recalibration.
Recalibration, okay.
Yes. The physical acts he describes, walking barefoot on clay, squatting by the fire, are pattern interrupts. If you spend 50 hours a week in a glass and steel tower, and you never intentionally interrupt that pattern by physically touching the earth, your brain begins to believe that the glass and steel are the only reality that exists.
You just get lost in the matrix?
You become alienated from your own biology.
It's a pressure valve. You have to let the static electricity of the city drain out of you into the ground.
That's a great way to put it.
But physical environment is only half the battle.
Right.
Because even if you are standing barefoot in a beautiful, pristine forest, you can still be completely disconnected from the actual people around you.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is where the source material takes a really interesting turn. It argues that if the physical earth anchors our bodies, language is what anchors us to each other. Specifically, the language of humility.
This is arguably the most vulnerable section of his entire body of work. He posits that true linguistic grounding doesn't come from mastering a language's complex grammar or, learning its vocabulary for business and commerce.
Right.
It comes from mastering the ability to say, I'm sorry.
He is borderline obsessed with apologies in this text.
He really is.
He explicitly lists the phonetic phrases for apologies in multiple languages. He writes out the Chinese, dui bu kisarnya. He writes the Japanese, gomen nasai and sumimasen.
Right.
He breaks down the Thai phrasing, even noting the gender differences, which is fascinating. Kauthud, krop for men, and ka for women. He talks about the absolute necessity of making excuses for mistakes, for misunderstandings, for using the wrong inflection or tone when you are trying to navigate a foreign culture. But I have to ask, why zero in so heavily on the apology?
Because an apology is fundamentally an act of ego death.
Ego death.
Yes. When you walk into a foreign culture, your default state is almost always ignorance. You don't know the unwritten rules, you don't know the nuances. If you approach that culture with arrogance, you remain a permanent outsider.
You're just a tourist consuming their space.
Exactly. But when you take the time to learn their specific cultural mechanism for apologizing, when you proactively learn how to say, "I'm sorry, I don't understand," or "I'm sorry, I used the wrong tone," you are verbally signaling to that localized system that you are not a threat.
It's like lowering your weapons before you approach the city gates.
Yeah.
You are explicitly telling them, I recognize your rules, and I apologize for my inability to follow them perfectly yet.
Precisely. It strips away the imperial mindset. Think back to his legal career fighting for bilingual education. He understands better than anyone that language is power. In a courtroom, the person who dictates the language dictates the reality of the room. But in these poems, he is totally flipping that dynamic. He is saying that when you are a guest in the world, the greatest power you have is the power to surrender your ego. That is how you build an actual bridge.
And the sources give us this incredibly vivid narrative to illustrate this bridge building.
Yeah.
It's the story of the girl in the sari in Kerala.
This is such a striking image.
The imagery here is almost cinematic. You have this young Indian girl wearing a traditional sari standing on top of a massive Asian elephant with two large ivory tusks.
Right.
She is standing on a piece of green earth that her family has owned for generations. It is a deeply traditional ancient scene. But what is she actually doing?
She's on her phone.
She is holding a modern cell phone up to the sky, desperately trying to pull down a signal so she can connect to China, Japan, and Korea.
It is the ultimate juxtaposition of the ancient world and the hyper-modern world. She is using the physical grounding of the elephant and her ancestral land as a literal launch pad to connect with the digital ether.
Right. And she's watching soap operas, deciphering characters, learning the distinct tones of these foreign languages.
And she uses that knowledge to literally escape.
She does. She leaves the village. She flies to China and Japan, where, according to the poem, she is welcomed because she has taken the time to learn their ways and their apologies.
But the pivotal moment of the story happens when she tries to enter Korea, right?
Yes. She wants to break into the K-pop industry.
Yeah.
And she fails. She is outright rejected because, despite her language skills, she doesn't understand the deep, unspoken customs of that specific subculture.
Which is a devastating blow. I mean, K-pop represents the absolute pinnacle of hyper-modern, highly curated, status-driven youth culture.
It is the cashmere coat of the music world.
That is a perfect way to frame it, yes. When she is rejected by that world, she is totally unmoored. Her plan falls apart.
But she doesn't go back home to Kerala. Instead, she finds grounding in the most unexpected place imaginable. She takes a job as a maid for an elderly Korean woman.
Right.
And these two women, who are separated by decades of age, separated by nationality and by their native tongues, find a shared frequency. They bond over the shared grief of modern society, destroying traditional family values.
They find common ground in loss.
Exactly. They share their dreams. And eventually they combine their talents. They open a small art shop together where they sell the girl's vibrant paintings of the elephant she used to stand on, right alongside the old lady's delicate watercolor prints.
It is a beautiful synthesis. She didn't find her grounding in the blinding lights of the K-pop stage. She found it in a quiet room with an elder, building a cross-cultural connection based on mutual vulnerability in art.
Yeah.
The language skills she learned on the elephant got her through the door, but it was the shared human experience of loss and hope that actually grounded her in the new country.
Now, I want to pause here for a second because I was reading through the outline for this deep dive earlier, and a massive contradiction just jumped out at me.
Okay, let's hear it.
In the story of the girl in Kerala, the cell phone is clearly the hero. It is the tool that allows her to learn languages, escape her isolation, and eventually find her destiny.
Right.
But in the very next section of Manuel's poetry, he absolutely excoriates technology. He completely turns on it.
He really does. He issues a blistering critique of modern connectivity. One of the core lines in the section is, "There is no grounding when you merely hold on to a cell phone."
Right. He writes about this terrifying concept of parallel lives. He paints a picture of two partners sitting in the exact same room, physically maybe 3 feet apart on a couch, but existing in completely different universes.
Because they're staring at their screens.
Yes, they are maintaining massive relationship-destroying secrets. And he actually lists them. One partner is hiding the fact that they were fired from their job 2 months ago, and they are just pretending to go to work every day.
Which is insane.
They're having silent, internalized disagreements about whether to have children. They are holding on to stubborn refusals to compromise with the other's family. They are disappearing into workaholism.
It is a haunting portrayal of proximity without intimacy. What's happening psychologically in that room is that the screen acts as a defensive shield.
A shield from what, though?
From reality. When you are looking at your phone, you don't have to look your partner in the eye. You don't have to face the uncomfortable conversation about the lost job or the in-laws or the kids.
Right, it's an avoidance tactic.
Exactly. The technology creates a simulation of connection. You are texting people, you are liking photos, you're retweeting things, which satisfies the brain's shallow craving for social interaction, but it completely starves the soul of deep, vulnerable grounding.
The text even warns that this technological society is one where surveillance rules and social controls are embedded in social media, erasing privacy.
A very prescient warning.
But I have to push back here, or at least ask for a reconciliation of these two ideas. How can the author praise the girl on the elephant for using her phone to connect to the world, but condemn the couple in the living room for doing basically the same thing? Is the phone a bridge or is it a wall?
Well, it depends entirely on the environment you're trying to escape.
Okay, unpack that.
For the isolated, like the girl physically trapped in a remote village, technology is a bridge to the broader human community. It is a literal lifeline.
Right.
But for the connected, like two partners sitting in a shared home who already have physical access to each other, technology becomes a wall designed to keep the other person out. The phone isn't inherently evil. It is simply an amplifier of intent.
Oh, wow.
If your intent is to connect, it helps. If your intent is to hide, it is the perfect camouflage.
That makes so much sense. We use the phone to avoid the friction of reality. And the antidote the author prescribes for this is staggeringly simple.
It's entirely physical.
Yes. He argues that no artificial intelligence, no algorithm can ever equal the silent communicative power of human touch.
Because touch requires absolute undivided presence.
And the examples he gives in the verse are so mundane yet so incredibly intimate. He doesn't talk about grand romantic gestures like buying diamonds or taking trips.
Well, it's all micro moments.
Exactly. Yeah. He talks about a simple peck on the cheek. He talks about a partner using the ends of their hair as a brush to softly tickle the back of the other's neck. He describes the act of gently wiping soap off a face in circular strokes.
It's very tender.
Making silly cartoon figures out of breakfast eggs, taking a walk over a bridge, and just mutually feeling a gentle breeze.
What do all of those actions have in common? They force your sensory perception into the immediate present tense.
Right.
You cannot be actively doom scrolling on Twitter while simultaneously registering the delicate feeling of hair tickling your neck. Your brain has to choose one or the other. And the author is arguing that true grounding requires what he calls synchronizing breathing.
Synchronizing breathing.
Yes. You have to attune your biological rhythm to the person next to you. A screen actively shatters that rhythm.
It's a profound reminder that intimacy isn't built in massive dramatic moments. It is built in the quiet accumulation of physical presence. So we've covered the physical grounding in nature, the linguistic grounding of humility, and the interpersonal grounding of touch. But this deep dive takes a very dark, very surreal turn in the next section.
It does get quite heavy here.
Because they also ask the ultimate question. What happens when your grounding is violently ripped away from you by trauma? When the physical world becomes a source of pain, where do you go?
You retreat into the subconscious. You retreat into myth and spirit. Trauma is the ultimate ungrounding force. It shatters your illusion of safety. And the author explores this through these incredibly vivid, almost hallucinatory dream sequences in the poetry.
Let's talk about the hospital dream. This sequence is visceral. We have a young child who has just undergone an operation. He is in severe physical pain. But the poetry suggests that the pain isn't actually the worst part.
No, it's the lack of control.
Right. The worst part is the absolute loss of autonomy. He is under the lingering effects of anesthesia. He feels like his body has been hijacked by strangers in white coats. He's been completely ungrounded from his own physical vessel.
The psychological terror of anesthesia is a perfect metaphor for helplessness. You are forced to surrender consciousness and just trust that the world won't destroy you while you are asleep. For a mind that constantly seeks grounding, that loss of control is absolutely terrifying.
So in his dream state, his mind attempts to reclaim control. He dreams he is a naked child, untethered from gravity, flying frantically through the sterile halls of the hospital.
Right.
He is flying around, desperately touching every medical gadget, every machine, every monitor he can find.
He is trying to understand the machinery that controls him. He is trying to tactily ground himself in the environment that is causing his suffering. But of course, touching the machines doesn't work.
It never does.
The clinical Western world cannot heal the trauma it caused.
Exactly. The shift happens when the dream abandons the physical hospital entirely. Suddenly, a blinding yellow light envelops him. He is transported completely out of the Western medical paradigm and into this heavenly Eastern spiritual realm.
A total paradigm shift.
He lands softly on a massive white lotus leaf. And he looks around, and the space is filled with other babies, all resting on their own lotus leaves. And they are completely at peace, and they are all collectively chanting a single syllable, Om.
The chant is the anchor. When physical control fails, spiritual vibration takes over. The vibration of Om in Eastern traditions is considered the primordial sound of the universe.
Right.
It is the ultimate frequency of grounding. By joining that chant, the child synchronizes his fractured nervous system with the rhythm of the universe. And the text notes that when he finally wakes up in his hospital bed, despite the physical surgery, he possesses a profound, unshakable calm.
He found an internal ground when the external ground was hostile.
Beautifully said.
And we see this same dynamic play out in a much more chaotic dream, the Bangkok token nightmare.
This one reads like an action movie.
It really does. There is a silver token that has magically trapped 4 souls. There is a Thai song playing on an infinite unstoppable loop, teaching the dreamer how to say Krumthep, which is the ceremonial name for the city of angels, Bangkok.
The looping song is a classic sign of a mind caught in an anxiety spiral. It's an obsessive loop. And then the dream environment violently destabilizes. Giants and eagles appear out of nowhere and begin tearing down blueprints and ripping apart skyscrapers.
It's the destruction of the citadel of alienation we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
The urban, planned architectural world is being violently dismantled by mythological forces. It is pure chaos. The ground is literally shaking.
But how is the dreamer saved? Not by fighting the giants. Not by trying to rebuild the skyscrapers. He is saved by a sudden blizzard of falling flowers and the emergence of a massive glowing Buddha.
A total surrender to the spiritual.
Right. The Buddha emanates a golden light that melts the silver token, freeing the souls and restoring absolute peace to the chaos.
Again and again, the motif is exactly the same. When the structural modern world collapses into trauma or chaos, Eastern spirituality, specifically Buddhism and Taoism, steps in as the ultimate safety net.
We see it one more time in the prophecy of the Golden Phoenix, too.
Yes. Let's talk about that. 2 friends who have spent their lives racing horses by a peaceful lake are visited by this mythical golden bird. And the phoenix delivers a terrifying prophecy. War is coming. The world they know will be destroyed, and they will be left bereft.
But the Phoenix offers a path to survival. It promises to take them to a hidden Taoist temple. And there, they won't learn how to fight the war, they will learn wisdom, and eventually they will rule the restored world not by force, but by uttering a single resonant Om.
It is a total rejection of Western adversarial conflict, and I think this reveals something deep about the author's own life. In one of the poems, he explicitly contrasts physical wounds with invisible wounds.
This is a very revealing moment in the text.
He tells a story about a logging accident. He intentionally took the fall to protect a friend's father from being crushed by falling logs. He survived, but he was left with a permanent, visible scar on his face.
A physical badge of honor, a wound you can point to and say, this is how I got hurt. People understand that kind of pain.
Right. But he argues that the physical scar is nothing compared to the invisible wounds. The psychological lacerations inflicted by a society that ignores the human need for recognition, for stillness, for dignity.
Trauma, in his world, is an earthquake. It drops the floor out from under you.
And I have to ask, considering Manuel spent his entire adult life operating in the U.S. legal system, which is arguably the most adversarial, combat-oriented dispute resolution system on Earth, Is he saying we have to just abandon our modern lives and retreat into mysticism to survive?
I wouldn't frame it as a retreat. Actually, I would frame it as an integration.
How do you mean?
Well, remember the dedication page of this book. He explicitly thanks his teachers of Chinese, Thai, and Japanese. He thanks them for expanding his spiritual vocabulary. He didn't quit the law to become a monk.
Right, he stayed a judge.
Exactly. He used Eastern philosophy to survive the law. He is constantly balancing dualities.
And that concept of duality is brilliantly captured in his poem titled He/You. It is a rapid-fire sequence of opposing forces that define a relationship.
I love the rhythm of this poem.
It's so good. It goes, he is the earth, you are the sea. He is the night, you are the day. He's the lie, you are the truth. He is courage, you are the heart.
It's a structural representation of trauma and healing. Trauma fractures us into extreme polarities. We become all fight or all flight.
Right.
Healing is the difficult, delicate work of holding both the earth and the sea within yourself at the exact same time. You need the rigid boundaries of the earth, the law, the intellect, but you also need the boundless, fluid acceptance of the sea, the poetry, the spirit.
Which brings us perfectly back to the story we opened the show with.
Yes, the roommates.
The ultimate integration of all these themes: physicality, cultural respect, conflict, and spiritual resolution. The story of the Muay Thai roommates. Let's look at the mechanics of what actually happens in that boxing ring.
So we have the physics major and the swimmer. They are exhausted, they are furious, and they have agreed that the only way to establish dominance is through the art of 8 limbs.
They're prepared to use fists, elbows, knees, and shins to batter each other into submission over a sleep schedule.
It's so extreme.
They step through the ropes. But because it is a Muay Thai ring, they cannot just come out swinging. They must perform the Wai Kru Ra Muay.
The traditional Thai salute and dance performed before every fight.
Right. They have to slowly circle a ring 3 times. They have to go to each corner, kneel in the dirt, bow, and make the prayer sign the way. 1 bow is for the Buddha, 1 bow is for the Dharma, which are the teachings of truth, and 1 bow is for the Sangha, the community of monks.
I want to break down the psychology of why this ritual is so incredibly effective at de-escalating violence.
Please do.
When these 2 young men enter the ring, their nervous systems are absolutely flooded with adrenaline. Their amygdalas, the fear and aggression centers of the brain, are lighting up like fireworks. They are in pure fight or flight mode. Biologically, they are animals ready to strike.
Primal vision, high heart rate, sweaty palms.
Exactly. But the ritual acts as a massive cognitive pattern interrupt. You cannot maintain blind rage while forcing your body to perform a slow, highly structured, deeply respectful motor sequence.
It's neurologically impossible.
Right. By making them kneel, by making them bow to the corners, the ritual forces their brains to transition out of the amygdala and into the prefrontal cortex. It literally forces mindfulness.
And while they're going through these slow motions, paying respect to the teachers and the community, the anger just evaporates. The poem describes how, right in the middle of the ritual, they suddenly look at each other and realize how absurd this whole thing is.
The ego dissolves.
Stripped of their academic egos, stripped of their athletic bravado, they realize they're just 2 kids trying to make their families proud. They have shared goals. They share a common humanity.
The ritual did what a shouting match never could. It grounded them in the present moment. And once they were grounded, the intellect could finally take over again. The physics major realizes, wait, I analyze complex orbital mechanics for a living? I can probably figure out a sleep schedule that accommodates a swimmer.
So they literally take off their heavy leather gloves, they climb out of the ring, they buy a couple of soft drinks, and they sit down and engineer a compromise.
They laugh at themselves.
They had to agree to mutually destroy each other, just to force themselves into a space where they had to look each other in the eye.
It is the perfect metaphor for diplomacy. And if you map this story onto Manuel del Valle Colón's career as a labor arbitrator and judge, it is profound.
Oh, absolutely.
A courtroom is basically just a boxing ring with wood paneling. You put a union and a massive corporation in a room, and they are prepared to bludgeon each other with lawsuits. The judge is just the referee. But Manuel is arguing that true justice doesn't come from letting them beat each other unconscious and declaring a winner.
Right.
True justice requires forcing both parties to perform the slow, uncomfortable ritual of recognizing the other side's humanity. Only then can you take the gloves off and write a schedule that works.
Man. So we have covered an immense amount of ground today. What does this all mean for you listening right now? The life and poetry of Manuel del Valle Colón give us a really clear blueprint. To be grounded is not a passive state. You don't just achieve it and keep it forever. It is a daily, active, multi-layered practice.
It is intensely physical. It requires recognizing when you are trapped in a citadel of alienation and intentionally putting the soles of your bare feet onto the dirt. It requires lowering your center of gravity.
It is linguistic. It means swallowing your pride and learning how to say, I'm sorry, in the language of the person you are trying to understand. It means carrying that verbal white flag to bridge the gap.
It is relational. It means recognizing when your cell phone has become a wall instead of a bridge. It requires putting the screen down so you can synchronize your breathing with the person sitting next to you, returning to the simple, silent communication of touch.
It means acknowledging your invisible wounds, the trauma that ungrounds you, and finding a spiritual frequency, and too, stabilize your mind when the physical world collapses. And finally, it means participating in the rituals of community that force us to see each other's humanity before we throw a punch.
The fact that a kid from the Carver houses could master the Ivy League, wield the power of the federal judiciary, and still find his ultimate peace in the poetry of Thai rituals and campfires, it proves that grounding is the ultimate survival tool. It is what allows you to travel to the very edges of human experience without losing your soul.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. It's a concept we touched on briefly, but I want you to really mull it over today. Think about the poem where this speaker says, "A wound is still a wound, regardless of how much it is ignored."
It's a quiet but totally devastating line.
It really is. We live in a society that rewards the illusion of invincibility. We spend hours curating our digital profiles, polishing our resumes, trying to project total competence. We all desperately want to wear the black cashmere coat and sit on the red leather couch.
We want to look like we have never been cut.
But what if the author is right? What if true grounding can only happen after we take off the cashmere coat? What if the only way to truly connect with the earth and with each other is to expose our invisible scars, squat by the fire in the dirt, and admit that we too are vulnerable, hurting, and desperately in need of an anchor?
You cannot heal a wound while pretending you aren't bleeding. Vulnerability is the absolute prerequisite for grounding.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. Take a moment for yourself, put the phone down, take your shoes off, go find some actual dirt, feel the ground beneath you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.